welcome, Jeanine. So lovely to be chatting with you again.
I'm so pleased to be back here, Patricia. I always enjoy our rich conversations in whatever shape or form they come in.
Yes. Well, so we connected some time ago, and it was when we started, well, my colleague and I started having conversations around what can feel traumatic at work. And then I know it raised a question for you around something that potentially you've experienced. And I feel like the majority of people I know in the corporate environment have been through either multiple events, single events, potentially something that triggers part of their childhood or potentially something new, and that it's prevalent across all sectors, really. That there can be situations or maybe structures or some aspect of the organization that can feel very traumatic for us being there. And so Laura and I started, raising or having conversations with people that we knew about it, because it was all with the idea that we as individuals can learn a lot more about trauma in the body and how we kind of experience that and what it is that we can do, and moving towards the pandemic and burnout and cases of more trauma, that has become quite prevalent for people to build up that capacity. And I know you do this in your business, so that's something that we'll discuss as well. But then another piece around the development of organizations. So how do we sustainably change them, or put processes or structures, or just to do more of the behavioral pieces in organizations to avoid those kinds of conflicts or to avoid that kind of trauma. So with this whole backdrop in place, and you were so lovely to say that you would be able to share your story around a piece that happened to you. And I think, as we discussed, it's very integral to your work. So if we can start with potentially an introduction and a lead into what experience you had that felt traumatic to you.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia, and I really acknowledge you for the work that you and your partner are doing together, because I believe it is something that is often perhaps overlooked or not recognized or acknowledged or worked on. So I really, truly, again, acknowledge the work that you are both doing to make a difference in the business world, because at the end of the day, or the corporate world, or in the organization space, because at the end of the day, we are all human beings and we all want to contribute, we all want to feel valued, we all want to be recognized, and hopefully do what we love. And of course, we know that there are a lot of people that do go into the workplace perhaps not doing what they love because they don't know what it is they want to do or have the opportunity to do that. So ensuring that there's a psychologically safe place to work and to be able to give back, to be able to provide value, and again, to be acknowledged for the work that is done and how they're showing up is a wonderful thing to do. For me, where to start? For me, when I was at school and when I left school, trying to work out what I wanted to do was one of the most difficult things for me, because I felt I could put my mind to anything and make things happen. And so that led to indecision. And so I really didn't know where I wanted to go. And I was very much guided by my parents, who seemed to, my dad worked in the finance industry, and he felt that that was a safe and secure place for me to go into. He felt that it was a place that you could get paid well and therefore you could be secure. And so really, even though perhaps, again, I could do those sorts of things. My passion did lie in art, but I had a belief that I wasn't good enough and wouldn't be paid enough in that field. So I went into the finance industry. And I was certainly someone that liked to achieve. I liked to put in and work hard. That was an ethic that was, or a way of living that was installed in me. And work hard to be able to continue to grow and expand and climb that ladder. And to, again, contribute somehow, some way. So I always knew from a very early beginning in my work life that making a difference was important, but I didn't know how to do that. And so I found in my early work life that I was appreciated and acknowledged by the people, my managers, the leaders. You know, I was always, and I'm very grateful for these men who did see my contribution and rewarded me through financial compensation, through promotion, through asking me to be part of certain programs to continue to elevate my career. And so I felt blessed in that way. And that was while I was living in Melbourne. And then I had an opportunity. I was popped out of I guess a number of people that were based in Melbourne to go up to Sydney to take on a short-term role, which again was a promotion because someone was on holiday, long-term holiday. So it was a wonderful opportunity. And I decided after living there for 3 months, I wanted to move to Sydney. And so I did that. And again, my first few roles, I was recognized and enjoyed working in those organizations. But then a new habit or a new pattern started to emerge where I worked with 2 managers who were not supportive. And I found myself putting in a whole lot of work, and the feedback was very abrupt and not helpful, and certainly made me feel undervalued, which led me to the last role where I finally decided I've had enough of working in the finance industry. So I worked with a leader who, when I first joined, almost had me on this pedestal and saw me as doing this wonderful work. And so I felt, and I was getting feedback from my colleagues and the people that I was serving, because I was a business development manager at that stage. So the feedback from my clients was all glowing and positive. And then one day I got this call from my manager to come down from Sydney to Melbourne to have a meeting. And so I was excited. I thought, oh, what's going to happen now? And when I met my manager, he handed over an envelope, which was my first letter of warning, which was devastating for me, because from my perspective, it was all about doing a great job. I was a high achiever. And so to get that first letter of warning without any warning, without being advised, Jeanine, you're not doing what we expect you to do. You're not getting the results that we want you to get. What do you need help with? How can we support you? Or these are the objectives we want you to meet. Clear objectives, without having any of that conversation at all, and to be given a letter of warning. This was it certainly when I was much younger and I guess much more shyer in terms of being able to speak up. Again, as I said, it was just devastating. I just remember being in tears. And, for people listening to this, they may be thinking, that's perhaps, not too devastating. And for others, it may be as well, like it was for me. And so I know, and I remember being in absolute tears for months, because of just being sideswiped, I guess, if that's the right word, by my manager. And so as a consequence of that, I went into overdrive. I was going to prove, this is my high achiever type strategy of okay, I'm going to prove that I am good enough, that I am valuable, that I am worthy. So I just went into overdrive, and I wanted to prove that I was worthy, and that I was meant to be on that pedestal that my boss, my manager, first put me on. And so that started to, as a consequence of that behavioral strategy, I started to achieve again. I started to get results on the board. I was able to, I was clear on my targets about what I was supposed to achieve from his perspective. And that overdrive led into, I guess, overwhelm, being tired, not able to think straight. And so it led to some errors. And errors that potentially just seemed like the world was conspiring for me to make those errors so that I would get out of that organization. And so it led to me getting my second letter of warning. So there was no conversation, there was no, Jeanine, this is what's happening, or this is what's happened. Again, how can we help you? What support do you need? Etc., etc. There was nothing like that. So the second letter of warning came my way, and I could just feel my whole body just sink. I just wanted the earth to swallow me up. When I received that second letter, it was just such again, an overwhelming, sinking feeling that I wanted the earth to swallow me up. And I had many conversations with people who were supporting me, people in the Sydney office who could see the work that I was doing. I had conversations with HR. HR were not prepared to support me. They were leaving it up to the manager, and this is quite a few decades ago, so I'm sure it's very different. I hope it's very different compared to those days. And so that led to my decision to actually finally listen to that, I guess, the universe saying, Jeanine, it's time to leave. This is not where you're meant to be. And gosh, I am so grateful for those messages. So even though it was devastating at the time, because again, it just struck the fear of not being good enough, not being valuable so hard. So now if I saw that leader, I would really thank him for that, that way that I was able to say goodbye to the finance industry, because otherwise I potentially would have been caught up in it, and perhaps had not left it as soon as I did, which has led me to where I am today. So yeah, so that's my story. And again, it's the story that I've made up. So at the time it was traumatic for me, because I remember at times just being in tears for no reason, whether it be in the work or outside, and it just felt very uncomfortable, very unrewarding, unsatisfying. And I didn't want to work for that organization anymore. It wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for the organization. It wasn't good for the team, who could see that I was upset as well, who were in support of me. I know that they felt it too, because again, they could see how I was working. And so yes, it wasn't a great outcome for anyone, until I eventually took the power back into my hands to decide, this is not for me.
Mm.
It's time to go.
And that's such a wonderful story. And it feels like there is just so much to unpack in it that would be useful for people. So I think from an organizational standpoint, what I do see is these reward systems or disciplinary systems that mirror what you experience when you're in childhood or in school. And they don't necessarily get more sophisticated, although in some organizations I think they do more strategic HR, and they, you know, there's a steer towards incorporating a lot more around a holistic sense of an individual, you know, treat them with compassion and give them, you know, whatever it is that they need in terms of support. But I see some of these kind of systems that feel very archaic to us in organizations. You know, there's a lot, I see performance management systems, companies often use them now, but there's a big steer with you know, groups of OD professionals or occupational psychologists who are saying you don't necessarily need to use the performance management process, because oftentimes people are then managed out, you know, whether they meet the goals or not, right? Because sometimes organizations are highly political as well, and then it becomes almost very difficult to sit in positions because of this atmosphere, or because of this resistance that you can feel in the culture or in the position. You're not entirely sure what's below the surface, because we don't get to engage in those kind of candid conversations sometimes. And so all of this, you know, the impact of all of that, what you were saying in terms of how it is that you felt, you know, the uncertainty that you're sitting with, potentially knowing something's going on but not having answers, not being supported through it, not having conversations, or being allowed to engage in that process. So there's no way that you can make any meaning of kind of what's just happened. And also the surprise that you had, that you felt around it, that there was no forewarning, you know, there was like not a realistic sense of what it is that they expected, which itself is really poor kind of performance, or poor managerial skills potentially. So yeah, I mean, there are individual variations, psychological and neurobiological sensitivities to trauma. Some people experience trauma as trauma and others don't. And that it can differ with events, and it can differ with the reactions to it. But I'm really interested to hear, you know, you mentioned a little bit around it. So the overachieving, then the need to show people what you're worth, the tears or the conversations that you needed to have afterwards, or the uncertainty. So was there anything else around it that you can kind of remember without being traumatized again?
Well, hopefully I've healed from that in so many ways. So, you know, as you were sharing, Patricia, what came up for me is remembering that potentially this was a pattern that I had, what's the word, developed with my dad, because I believe that my manager, I believe he did like me. I remember, it was Christmas party time, and we were all flown in from Sydney to Melbourne to enjoy a Christmas party. But at that stage, I think that was after I'd received my second letter of warning, or maybe when I flew down to Melbourne, I'd received my second letter of warning before the Christmas party. So I was not engaged at all. And I remember that he did reach out and sort of put his hand on my shoulder to indicate, I know you're going through a tough time. But that was the only thing he did. There were no words to express that. I never heard those words. So there was no compassion. It was just very official, and here's your second letter of warning, due to a very, it's a long story, but a very silly thing that actually I didn't do. It was someone else made an assumption and did something which my manager blamed me for. So, and again, I really thank that whole episode, because it has led me to do the work that I do and to have this conversation with you right now. So I'm so grateful for that. So there are definitely no grudges held on my perspective towards him. So now that's potentially a reminder of my relationship with my dad. My dad and I had a very difficult relationship as I grew up. It changed in my latter years. It was a very different relationship. But my dad was very hard on me, very critical. And again, I knew that I was always trying to prove myself to my dad. And I don't think I realized it at the time. I know I wouldn't have, but it was about, I'm going to show you that I am worthy. So I didn't say that in my head, so to speak, but that would have been the pattern or the driving force behind what I did as a young girl, to show I'm worthy, I'm good enough. As I said, my dad was quick to judge, and very quick to judge, and had a very cross, quick temper. So there is where I believe my achieving pattern began as a consequence of that. So, and that pattern, it did work well for me, as I mentioned, for a very long time. I was acknowledged and supported by my leaders throughout my working career in Melbourne, and even at the beginning of Sydney, but towards the end, all of a sudden, here was this pattern. And I managed, as I said, to sabotage myself. The pattern got out of control, and so it was a great knock on for me to go, okay, let's stop this pattern. What's happening about this pattern? What's really here? And of course, I only really found out much later, as I went on this coach training journey that I went on, to discover much more about myself, and to understand my patterns of behavior, my beliefs about myself, how I came to be as I am today. So, and I also reflect back on, that time where, with this particular leader, it could have been such a different story. If there was that support, if there were those conversations, if there was clear expectations shared with me from the beginning, because that's where the trouble began. But also, if there was trust in me, to have a conversation and have trust in me that actually, Jeanine, this is where you could do differently. This is where I need to see you do differently. What do you need? Et cetera, et cetera. I could have been, a really good asset to them. And, I know that, again, through the feedback that I got from my Sydney colleagues, the clients that I worked with, I know that I was doing something right, because I was receiving great feedback. So, when I reflect upon it now, I believe they lost a really, hopefully, valuable asset that could have really supported their sales, but they didn't see it that way. And as you shared, Patricia, it was more of a performance management conversation, which was not very clear, not didn't make me feel good. And so I lost trust in the organization. And of course, when there's a loss of trust, it makes it very, very, very difficult for me to be engaged, and the organization, of course, they've lost trust in me for them to be engaged with me. So I hope that answers your question. Just checking in.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does, because you know, and it's great that you can have this awareness around kind of what was motivating you, and that pattern with your father. And sometimes we don't get to discuss our psychology inside of the company, but it really does play out. And then, you know, not having the space now to understand where this manager was coming from, but his own psychology and his own, you know, what he was grappling with, which I can imagine, you know, to him feels crippling as well. But so how do we use an organization as a place to grow, rather than you know, a place where all these defenses can manifest in bureaucratic and political systems sometimes? So there's a real sense that we're not, you know, allowing the whole person to actually, or organizations to be as powerful as they could be in terms of individual development, but that, and by the same breath, highlighting that sometimes it feels like the output is just towards performance and production, and that obviously is a big thing in society in general, which is driving a lot of people's behavior on a daily basis, but without time for personal check-in. So I feel like there's a lot of things that are going on, these subtle forces that don't necessarily allow ourselves to, you know, to have the experience that we need. I know you're highly intelligent. The coach training I've been on has been very impactful in terms of the way I look at work and what it is that I can do inside of a work environment. So I appreciate that even very intelligent people can get caught inside of issues inside of organizations where it does feel terrible, it does feel traumatic.
Yeah. I was just going to say thank you for highlighting him as well, and the system, the system that we were all in at that time. You know, I absolutely do believe that he definitely had his challenges, and potentially, you know, looking back now and even then, that there were insecurities about, or maybe not so much insecurities, but just a lack of awareness of how to lead and how to have perhaps not so much challenging conversations, but yes, that's part of it, but to actually, you know, how to give feedback in a way that supports your people, that brings them on board, that actually lights their fire in terms of, you know, what is possible, what, you know, what is the way forward. You know, there has been a challenge, but look at the way forward, and oh gosh, that's exciting in terms of how we can rectify that. You know, he did not have the skills, the knowledge, the awareness to see that as an opportunity to empower him as a leader and to empower me as one of his team members. So there was just a lack of awareness, because I'm sure if he knew all of this now, he would make a different choice, because I don't believe he was a vindictive, nasty person. He just didn't have the skills to be able to have an empowering leadership conversation that empowers others to grow and expand. You know, his definition of leadership perhaps was very different from leadership that we know it to be, Patricia, you and I, in terms of that emotionally intelligent, using everything that's in the system using everything that's coming up in a way to, what's here to learn, what's here to, where can we do even perhaps better, that's going to support the person, the team, the organization, the clients, the community, the country, the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, you highlight some incredible skills there, because I really, and I think these just need to be taught to everybody. And I know you do this in coach training, but actually there's so much scope for leadership development, or team development as well. So, and there were some things that you mentioned just initially, but I'd love to get your thoughts on more of it as it forms the content of what it is that you teach. But allowing yourself to be guided by whatever's coming up intuitively, allowing yourself to brave those difficult conversations, knowing how to do that, handle those tough conversations, the personal check-ins, which are so incredibly important, so that you start building relationships with people on an individual level. And I think the premise of, your whole coaching space is that everybody is naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. So we don't look at anybody as, damaged or wounded, or not wounded is maybe not the right word, but that everybody has their own way of behaving, and having that space to have that conversation around what that looks like for everybody is really a beautiful, sophisticated way of actually enabling a team to move forward. And those are just a few pieces that I got from the coaching. I think very applicable to teams, and as I mentioned, just getting teams to work together. Can you explain a little bit more around, and maybe it's relating back to your experience, because what you teach now, I can see the link. So some of those things that you teach that you feel are so powerful for organizations.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. Gosh, there's so much in that we can do to support organizations. So what do we do? And linking it back to my experience, I guess, first and foremost, if I go back to my experience, having the skills and abilities and awareness and emotional intelligence to give and receive feedback. So that's one thing that, we've certainly supported our clients to experience. So we've been engaged by organizations who wanted to support leaders and managers to have empowering conversations when they're doing the performance reviews. And so to set it up in a way that's psychologically safe for both parties, because potentially, as per my experience, my leader, my manager wasn't equipped to have an empowering conversation with me. He potentially had his fears triggered too. He wouldn't perhaps have known that that little boy within him was in that room with him and I, and that he was potentially maybe speaking from what he learned as a little boy. So he didn't have those skills to be able to have that to create a psychologically safe place. And so that's what we've done with the corporates that we've worked with. We've supported the leaders to understand how to set that up, how to partner with the person that they are having a conversation with, knowing that there is a dynamic here of leader and team member that reports to them, but still allowing the person to know that they have a voice and that it is safe to speak up. So we call that ways of working, setting up those ways of working so that it, again, provides the person that they're providing feedback to, a place to be able to share their voice, and to know that actually, you know, when as leaders you go into these conversations, it's a learning opportunity for you as well. It's a place where you can also understand how you can be better as a leader. So it's setting that up, and then it's having a conversation about how to provide that feedback. You know, what needs to actually be in place to make that, again, psychologically safe, but also to the types of questions to support the person that they're providing feedback to the opportunity to speak and find the answers inside themselves. You know, for example, it could be asking the person that they're giving feedback to in a performance appraisal, you know, what is it that you believe went well? And what is it that you believe could be done differently? And what could be done even better? So by asking those sorts of questions, it gives the person to be able to respond. And of course, there is the giving feedback as well about, you know, what went well from the leader's perspective and what could be done even better. So there's so much more to it than that, but that's one thing.
Yeah, I mean, if I can just jump in there quickly, don't want to lose it. It's a great use of clean questions, and also questions that put you into a thinking brain, a relaxed thinking part of your brain, to gain that larger perspective, so that your performance management discussion doesn't have to feel like you're immediately on the defensive. So yeah, just wanted to feed that back, because that's what I heard.
Yeah, so, and those clean questions, meaning that they are not filtered to, you know, what is it that you feel, see, hear. They're really open questions that allows the person to respond in their natural way. Yes, and it's also about supporting the both parties to come into the prefrontal cortex, out of the fear part of their brain, where they're going to be in judgment, when they're in fear, or they're perhaps not going to be listening. They want to get out of, you know, how do I get out of here as soon as possible? Or on the defense, or no, that's not it, you know, on the fight side of things. So if we can support our people that we're working with to come into their prefrontal cortex, yes, there's going to be trust. There's going to be the ability, the space, the ability to reflect, to be able to respond in a way that is conscious, mindful, reflective, and safe. So that's a great perspective that you bring there, Patricia. So yeah, and it's potentially from, you know, going back to your question, what else is it that we do to support organizations to ensure that they are set up to have empowering conversations is really either through coaching the various levels of the organization. You know, if we can start at the top down, even better, because it will support leaders to step into an energy that is, again, empowering and potentially leads by walking the talk, so to speak, so that it can ripple down through the organization. It's supporting leaders to identify who they really are, who, you know, what is their purpose, what are their values, what is it that they want to achieve. Of course, these purpose and values, it potentially sounds very maybe big and perhaps not, what's the word I'm looking for, Patricia? I
was going to say that it's not practical, or pragmatic. Yeah.
So it might sound that it's not, or it might sound like it's a bit airy-fairy, but actually it is the most important work that we can do when we really understand who we are and what it is that we want to be here for in this world. And if we're aware of our values that guide our actions or our decisions all the time, if we are consciously aware of what is most important to us, then we can link that back into everything that we do. And at work, outside of work, but certainly at work, we can be authentic, we can be grounded in who we are and know how we can link to the organization's values, the organization's purpose, our KPIs, our goals, our role description. You know, we can link everything to our purpose and values, which means we're going to be more confident, natural, as I said, grounded, centered. And, you know, if we're in that space, and again, potentially recognizing that, you know, what is good for me is potentially also going to be good for others and the greater good. It just has an ability to permeate with every conversation, everyone we connect to. It's like that compass, it's like that internal compass that we have within us to be able to, again, be our best version of ourselves. And when we're doing that, inspire others to come with us on the journey and trust us. So, and being aware of the neuroscience as well, of those conversations and who we're being and how we're showing up is also incredibly supportive for leaders to recognize, ah, yes, I'm back here versus again here in the decision-making part, the effective decision-making part of my mind. We also like to tap into, you know, the people that we work with, not only here, but also the heart mind as well. Because again, that brings confidence, groundedness, centeredness, knowing that there is absolutely a job to do, that there is absolutely things to be created, objectives to be met, goals to be met. You know, the organization is here for a purpose. So it's just once those linkages are made, it just skyrockets everything that leaders are doing. And again, that can filter down that process. You know, if leaders also learn the skills of coaching, it can filter down the levels. We've had the privilege to be able to actually work with teams and provide team coaching, because of course coaching everyone in an organization may or may not be viable, but certainly providing group coaching, team coaching, can again support individuals and obviously the team, the organization, to create the outcomes they want to create. So there are a few things that we've done as an organization to support them to have these conversations. So we've certainly worked with leaders, CEOs, that executive suite level, but also managers, leaders, and specialists as well, to support them to be able to have empowering, courageous, brave conversations that allows them to step into their vulnerability, their fears, to recognize actually those fears are there to teach them, you know, there's something to learn from this, there's something to understand and appreciate, to do something different that is empowering. So yes, we've been very lucky to, Marie, my business partner, and I have been very lucky to do this work. So it is a combination of coaching, team coaching, providing coaching programs, so training leaders to become coaches, or So it's been a combination of to become credentialed, but also just to learn the skills. They haven't necessarily had to become credentialed, but they've learned the skills of deep listening, questioning, providing feedback in an empowering way, to get curious about, you know, what's here in the systems, what's in these challenges, what's here for us to learn. How can we improve instead of getting bogged down in the problems? How can we see another perspective that allows us to grow? Which reminds me of also appreciative inquiries that we've also held with organizations. So again, it's about supporting them to appreciate, what is it that we want to be? Who do we want to be as leaders? How do we want to show up? Who do we want to be? What is it that we want to commit to that will support empowering conversations? So there are a few things that we've been involved in, which is a large part of the work that we do, and the work that we've absolutely loved, because we know that it makes a difference. It changes something that's in the system. You know, it's breaking the old patterns that are in the system. And as you said, Patricia, it's earlier, you know, we have that belief that the people we work with are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And it's also in the organizations that we work with, it's trusting the system, you know, when it is showing that there are challenges, that it is creating outcomes that are not so good, that it is an opportunity to learn, to grow, expand, and do things differently in a much better, empowering way.
Yeah, and certainly that feels like you know, the definition of a healthy organization, which you know, a lot of authors talk a lot about. It's even team learning is the ability to get over our defensiveness in order to innovate together. But it does take a level of awareness and maturity in individuals' part to notice when that happens. And I think, you know, just to also put in here that I think what is so great about your work is that it works on a very individual level first. So it's able to establish that self-efficacy and that confidence around people's own blueprint first, and then how that works inside of the system, because sometimes we're not afforded that opportunity. You know, we're given the organizational values, and that can feel a little bit like brand washing, but actually there's a lot going on for individuals underneath. So I mean, these are all pieces that I obviously really appreciate, and you've been absolutely courageous in sharing all of this information with me. So thank you so much. If you can just let the viewers know how people can get in contact with you, or if you're running anything currently.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. It's been a joy. Yes, it's been a joy to share this story. And again, it's appreciating the outcomes that have been created from that experience, that have been so incredible, amazing, expansive, and allowing me to understand my purpose and my values, so that I am making decisions purposefully, mindfully, to support others to do the same. So I know once I understood that for myself, how decision making and how to work with others was so much easier from that point on. So and of course it's still evolving and expanding as we don't remain the same. I believe we're always changing and expanding. So it's been a joy to share and know that it's led to something amazing. So you can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook, but LinkedIn is where my professional work really resides. And so did I change my name? No, I'm still Empower World. I'm just going to change my name now so that people can see my spelling. So you can find.
Yeah, we'll put the links below.
Great.
Yeah. And
my website is www.empower-world.com. So again, on the website, it shows the work that Marie and I have done and what we offer. And I'd say they're the main places to find me. There's potentially so much more, but hopefully I can meet you at some stage as if you're interested in getting in touch. Our programs are also on the website. So our coach training programs are coming up in January. And if you're perhaps interested in doing bespoke work, please do send me an email, Jeanine@empower-world.com. So thank you, Patricia, for that opportunity to share.
Thank you so much.